Hello and welcome to Not for Sisters Only 2020, Campaigning and Winning in the Time of COVID. This is another fantastic issues forum hosted by my Congresswoman, Gwen Moore of Wisconsin. Hello everyone, my name is Dr. Joan Prince and I have again the distinct pleasure of moderating a strategic dialogue around the major issues of the day. And it's a dialogue that our Congresswoman hosts every year at Congressional Black Caucus. Most of you know that she brings together constituents and star guest panelists every year, right after the prayer breakfast. But if you know my Congresswoman, trust me, you know that even a virtual CBC and a pandemic was not stopping her this year from bringing information, strategy, and a charge to all of our viewers as one of the most important elections of our lifetime looms ahead. So let me introduce that political leader that makes everything happen, and she's going to make some opening comments for us. Let me tell you who my Congresswoman is. I like to brag here. This is the fun part for me. I know she would, if she could, she would try to cut me off, but I'm not going to let her do that. So Congresswoman Gwen Moore was elected to represent Wisconsin's 4th Congressional District in 2004, which made her the first African-American elected to Congress from the state of Wisconsin. She is a member, yes she is, of the esteemed House Ways and Means Committee. And it's the oldest committee, as you know, in the United States Congress. And it has jurisdiction over things that are important to me as well, such as the Social Security system, Medicare, foster care, TANF, on and on. She's also an active member on the Congressional Progressive Caucus, the LGBT Equality Caucus, the Great Lakes Caucus, and the Democratic Steering and Policy Committee. What I love about her is that she has been outspoken on behalf of low-wage workers, and in 2014, she practices what she preaches. She peacefully demonstrated for a living wage with fast food workers, which led to her arrest. She's a champion for women, and she served as the Democratic co-chair of the Congressional Women's Caucus from 2011 to 2013. What I also want you to know about my Congresswoman is that she's made it her mission to give voice to the voiceless, both domestically and abroad. She's been an ardent supporter of initiatives that put low-income students on the path to educational success. She is an alum, and some of you will appreciate this, a strong advocate for the federal TRIO programs. As my Congresswoman she herself started college as a single expectant mother on welfare, and she will tell you she could only complete her education with the help of TRIO. She was also a member of the Wisconsin State Assembly and the Senate before serving in Congress. Guess what though? My Congresswoman was an honorary chairperson of the 2020 Democratic National Convention hosted in Milwaukee, and she exerted her influence to ensure that a virtual convention still addressed the needs of those that need the most. She's a tireless advocate for the rights of women, voting rights, and civil rights. And as I always like to say, she's the 8th of 9 children. Her dad was a union factory worker. Her mother was a public school teacher. Folks, she's the real deal, people. She's authentic. She's my Congresswoman. She is Congresswoman Gwen Moore.
Wow. Well, thank you, Dr. Ambassador Joan Prince. She didn't introduce herself, but many of you may or may not know. She's a vice chancellor at the University of Wisconsin in Milwaukee. That's her day job. Yeah. And she has so many other jobs, up to and including just recently having been on the host committee for the Democratic National Convention. And so we appreciate the hard work that she put in. And even even after it became virtual, she was very instrumental in pulling it off. I want people to know that that convention is going to be the gold standard, I think, for how conventions operate in the future. Even though it was virtual, all of the machinations were rolling out of Milwaukee. All those screens you saw, that roll call, and quite frankly, we trained 100,000 young people at that convention to go and advocate in their community. But Dr. Joan Prince is the only person that I know that came to Washington, D.C. to visit and hitched a ride with Barack Obama on the plane back home. He was coming to Milwaukee, and during the course of the plane ride became an ambassador. So just go figure. So I just really do want to thank her for this conversation. We're going to have a really exciting conversation today with Not for Sisters Only, and I want to thank all the staff who put it together. I want to definitely thank the foundation for their stewardship. We're going to try to keep this nonpartisan because the issues that have an impact on our audience, on the Black community, is really not partisan. If you are a young African American in America, there is a lot at stake with regard to voting, and how to reach those people is something that we want to share with you today. And I have a very special guest who's a little bit younger than me. I would say a lot younger than me. And I know that Dr. Prince, you are going to introduce her for us, but I just want to say before you introduce her that I'm really excited about this conversation because we're going to have the benefit of someone who's currently in the mix, who is young, who's able to sort of lean into some of the questions that some of us more seasoned people are curious about when we try to negotiate our way and to communicate in the age of COVID. Back to you, Dr. Prince.
Thank you, Congresswoman. You see why I love her. You see why I adore her. So as I said earlier, each year the Congresswoman brings to her Issues Forum star guest panelists. We are just so excited when we find out who the panelist is going to be every year. That never dies down for me. And so when I found out that it was the individual I am introducing, I got really excited again. I had the opportunity to meet her once, and now it's just a wonderful opportunity to have her back. So what I like is that this guest panelist is going to provide information to really stimulate us to think differently and to think strategically, both at the ballot box and around policy changes. So who is this wonderful person who is very well known for her advocacy work and political commentary? She is, drum roll, Aisha C Mills. She's a political commentator on CNN and MSNBC. She's a seasoned political strategist and social impact advisor. She has led and won campaigns that build political power for women, people of color, and LGBTQ people for years. So she's not new to this game. She's been in it. She completed a resident fellowship at the Harvard Kennedy School's Institute of Politics, where she hosted a weekly seminar, now listen to this, on identity politics and the rise of the new American majority of people of color. Oh, I wish I had listened into that. Previously, she was the first African-American woman to ever lead a national LGBTQ organization in her role as president and CEO of the Victory Fund and the Institute. She's been a senior fellow at the Center for American Progress, where she founded, I love founding these things. She founded and directed the Fighting Injustice to Reach Equality initiative, better known as FIRE, dedicated to eliminating social, health, and economic disparities faced by LGBTQ people of color. She's a nationally respected voice on progressive policy and politics, and she's published dozens of policy reports and political and cultural analyses at the intersection of race, gender, and sexuality. One of my favorite quotes from her is, and I quote, "Our democracy must be reflective of, responsive to, and led by the diverse communities that are the fabric of our nation. End of quote. Ladies and gentlemen, Aisha C Mills. She will bring
Thank you.
opening comments, and mwah, it's good to have you here.
Ladies, I am so glad to be back. Thank you so much for that beautiful introduction. Congresswoman, I so love and appreciate you for forever. I mean, you have always been one of the most authentic members up on the Hill. I have always admired the way that you lead with your personal story. You know, people often forget that the politics should be personal. And you have always, in your leadership, started off by sharing your experience and your passion for how you came to really recognize the role of government in people's lives and the role that government should play. So thank you for that. And also, thank you for hosting this forum for Sisters Only. You were lifting us up and making sure that Black women had space and that we were building power before we became sexy to the Democratic Party. Before it was clear that Black women as a constituency were critical, you always have been holding this space for us and giving us, you know, opportunities to flex and share our power. So thank you for that. And, you know, I'm so honored to be a part of this conversation at this moment in time, because we are in such a critical, pivotal moment in our democracy. And throughout history, Black people have believed in America. We have fought for America. We have manipulated to the best of our ability the tools of America in order to drive change and transformation, and frankly, to preserve the dignity of America, even as America had its foot on our backs and did not see the dignity within us. And so, you know, we are in this interesting moment in time where Black women are leading. We are going to lead. We are going to save our democracy, I believe. And so I'm just honored and excited to be here to share in this conversation with you all.
I'm so excited. Is this not the bomb panel? I just love this.
It is.
Love this. So now let's get down to the dialogue, okay? Because we want to use our time well. So let me set context for you, if I could. We're actually taping this so that you, our listeners, understand. We're actually taping this on Patriots Day, September 11th. So I bow in memory of those who worked and those lives that were lost as well. But we are taping on Patriots Day. We realize that you're actually viewing this in October. And so while we know that the strategies won't change by then, we know that the urgency will, because we'll be less than 30 days out. There's going to be less time to think about your plan for getting to the polls and for taking people with you and ways to protect your rights to cast that ballot. So what we did was, because this is how the Congresswoman rolls, as they say, she makes sure that her constituents' voices are heard. So we solicited questions from those constituents, from those supporters, from what we have been hearing. And those are the kinds of questions that I'm going to pose to these two dynamic powers that I have to dialogue with. And I'm just excited about that. So get your pen and paper ready, okay? Because we're going to address what I call the 3 Ds. Data, okay? You need information for strategy. You just, yes, we talk at Big Mama's table, but when you leave the house, you need some data to drive what you're getting ready to do. So data, direction to me are the strategies. That's my plan, my direction, my strategies. And the last D is determination. What does it take to have your vote respected and for you to be able to select and put forward a ballot of your choice? Okay, so let's do that. Let me start this conversation off with the Congresswoman, and then I'm going to ask Sister Aisha to add your thoughts as well around this first question. This is non-partisan discussion, so I'm going to have questions regarding both nominees from both parties. So let me start off with this one, because I think this is one that I'm hearing a lot, and your constituents are as well. On the Democratic side of the House, what does our vice presidential nominee bring to the table? And I'm specifically speaking of the Biden-Harris team, and specifically speaking about Harris. What does that nominee bring to the table that might have been missing from Biden's portfolio? Does she truly strengthen the ticket and the opportunity for that side to win? So Congresswoman, if I could start with you, what does she bring to the table that might have been missing from the lead candidate's portfolio? And does she truly strengthen that ticket?
Well, thank you for asking that question, Dr. Prince. I think that we have speculated for quite a while about the difference that a woman might make being on the ticket, and certainly what an African-American woman would mean to the ticket. I'll just have to say, with regard to one of your indicators, data, we have seen that the majority of white women have given their vote to Republicans, regardless of whether or not we had a white woman on the ticket or not. I mean, Hillary Clinton, for example, was not able to capture the majority of white women's votes. And so I don't know necessarily that Kamala Harris was put on the ticket to attract white women, although being a woman is still something that could be attractive. I think that Kamala Harris's position on the ticket really can sort of blunt some of the conversation that we're having around justice in policing. She is an original co-sponsor of this legislation that would rein in the misbehavior and misconduct of police, that would define and change qualified immunity. And really, I think that this is, I'm looking at Brilliant Corners here. Sorry, we can't screen share, but it was done by Cornell Belcher, a pollster who worked for Obama and is the CEO of Brilliant Corners. And these are old data by the time you see it, but they're in fact, subsequent to the death of George Floyd, there was a really something like 63% support for justice in policing and really changing that. Really a huge sea change from past data. I mean, this time 4 years ago, there was an online petition. My son told me about this. An online petition in July of 2016 that demanded that the Obama White House declare Black Lives Matter a terrorist organization. And now here we are in 2020 with a substantial majority of people really being able to hear and listen the message of justice in policing. And that is a sea change in terms of opportunities to attract women, suburban women, white women, young Black men, young people, and to solidify the base of Black people who may or may not vote on a regular basis.
Well said, well said. Sister Aisha, your thoughts around that?
So I appreciate that the Congresswoman led with a data point for us all to wrap our minds around just the voting patterns of white women. What has been interesting, y'all probably were paying attention to the drumbeat and calls for the Democratic ticket to select a Black woman as a running mate. There were so many people around the country. We need a Black woman on the ticket. We need a Black woman on the ticket. And a lot of people didn't understand why. What is that about? Because, theoretically, throughout the history of this country, the vice presidential candidate has been relatively inconsequential to the outcomes of an election. But here's why this matters right now. When we also look at the data, the truth is that the Democratic ticket, no Democratic president has won the presidency of the United States with a majority of the white vote, period. So Lyndon Johnson was the last president a Democratic president who actually won and had the majority of the white vote. Since then, from Carter on up through Obama, only about 40-ish% of the electorate that votes for the president who is a Democrat that becomes president is white. So Clinton won with 40%, but Barack Obama, when he first won, he only had 42% of the white vote. For his reelection, he only had 39% of the white vote. So when you think about just political strategy in a kind of, across partisanship, right? What are the Republicans playing in order to win versus what the Democrats are playing in order to win? The truth is that the core base of the Republican Party is a whiter base, which is why when the Congresswoman says, white women are voting Republican overwhelmingly, it has nothing to do with perhaps a gender affinity. They're gonna vote white, and that ends up being Republican. Similarly, on the Democratic side, you have the winning coalition is really, really diverse. It is about young people, but it is deeply about Black people maximizing turnout. It's about Latinx communities, and it's about just overall the diversity of America, and certainly the more liberal white aspect of that, which is actually the minority. So when all of this kind of political fodder is going on about, well, Kamala Harris, and why Kamala Harris matters, it's because there's a real clear sense that if there is to be progress in America towards policing reform, if there is to be an administration that prioritizes equity across all communities that are being disenfranchised and marginalized in America, that we're going to need to have an administration who cares about those things, and the type of person on the ballot to rally the coalition that ticket would need would likely be a person of color and or a woman of color, a Black woman, that would help bring out those constituencies. So, my thought about the power of having a Kamala Harris on a ticket, even where his history has shown us that the vice presidency is neither here nor there in terms of outcomes. This time it's different because the rallying of political strategy for either side is actually pretty bifurcated along racial lines, whether we want to admit it or not. And so when you have someone on a ticket who is reflective and representative of our broader democracy and our nation, the assumption is that more voices are being reflected in the process. And that, I think, is going to be what we see play out in how these campaigns move. The last thing I want to say, Dr. Prince, is I want to offer another D to your conversation on strategy. In this cycle, and even from 2016 to now, the other D that we're seeing that is so powerful is distraction. So much of the political strategy of the right is really about a distraction from a lot of the real serious issues that the Congresswoman and others are talking about. Right now, we are in the middle of the worst pandemic that we've ever seen in our lives. And there are leaders who are trying to do something about it, trying to move measures to support Americans. And then you have other leaders who are creating a distraction to pretend that this isn't a crisis and it doesn't exist. Same thing with, the politics. We are in a trying time where people aren't going to be able to vote in the same traditional way that they're used to. And so we've got to figure out, how do we have access to the ballot that makes sure that people can participate? Well, there's also a significant group of people who are trying to create a distraction to keep people from being able to participate, manipulating the post office, whatever it might be. And online, and this is what everybody who is watching today really needs to be cautious about. There are foreign entities that, Russia, China, whoever, that are intentionally creating distractions through social media to undermine our political discourse in America, so that it is difficult to trust anything that we see or hear, because
Absolutely.
there's just distracting voices. And when you have that real attempt to even undermine the discourse, there's a real attempt to create discord in our democracy. That is what creates a situation that is so unstable that we all need to be really, really paying attention to. And that's what's been different about the 2016 election cycle, and certainly what we need to watch out for in 2020. And what I am seeing in the data is that, especially with the addition of Kamala Harris onto the Democratic ticket, that has just created more fervor for distracting elements, narrative, conversation, et cetera, to try to manipulate this process, so that even as folks who are paying attention and trying to make the right choices about who we want to support, it's difficult for us to sort out through the madness what we should believe and what is true. And so I just want us to just have that in the back of our minds, to be, really cautious about what you share, what you hear, double check, fact check, etc., because we don't want all the distractions to undermine our democratic process this time.
Well said. Well said.
Well said. And could we dig down a little deeper into that, Congresswoman? Because Aisha mentioned the Postal Service and the post office. We need to just stop for a moment and have a conversation about this. So from a constituent's lens, over the last 2 months, 2.5 months, I have noticed a drastic change in my personal mail delivery. Last night, and it's all local, right? The constituents call you for the things that we don't like at our local level. Last night, my mail came at 10 p.m. I looked outside at 9:45 p.m. The mailbox was empty. I came back at 10, I had mail. This is what's been happening over the last 2.5 months. I can go for days without mail, and then I'll get something that's 2 weeks old. So I say to you, the maneuvering that we as the common folks see around Postal Service, we have a lot of angst around whether or not absentee balloting, mail-in ballots are going to be compromised. So my question to you is, should I have faith in that part of the process? Do I need a different strategy around that? So talk to us about what we can do, because we're ready to do this. We're very nervous around the Postal Service and the worthiness and the timeliness of our ballot.
Well, thanks for asking that, Dr. Prince. And the biological definition of survival is the ability to adapt to change. And I do think that is part of what we see political operatives doing these days, Democrats and Republicans alike, because Republican electors are affected by the mail as well. And they are changing their outreach strategies as well. So instead of having the little van that picks up voters and takes them to the poll, they are deploying people out to make sure they are tracking, for example, when you receive your absentee ballot. It's knowable, it's public information, when absentee ballots are being sent out, what day they come out. The political operatives use it all the time. Am I right, Aisha, to figure out when to do targeting in their mail? And you can tell, when you don't want to waste money at the end of the campaign, you don't want to mail to the same people who've already voted. So it's knowable that Aisha Mills has not voted. And it takes a lot more work for our volunteers, but we have, people who know these metrics. And I think that, we're going to have to do the hard work of making sure that we get the vote out by other means. Now, let me just say about the post office. This postmaster at some point may be in a lot of legal trouble, but for the time being, he is right now feeding in. He is not right now. There is no indication that any of the things that have been done are going to be reversed, or that there are going to be orders from the top to change anything. And so that is why it is important for anyone who is going to vote by mail to do it early, as soon as they possibly can, to apply for your absentee ballot. And no matter how delayed the mail is, if you request your absentee ballot and send it in as soon as you possibly can, there's no way it won't be delivered. Many places, I know it's true in Wisconsin, have drop-off spots for and that is a lot more convenient for some people. I mean, I know that my post office and mailbox, it's a lot easier for me to go to a drop-off place than it is to necessarily get to the post office. That depends on your own geographic circumstances. And I think that you know, as we are calling people to get the vote out, we have to say, have you, you know, we have to say, you know, Dr. Prince, you know, we noticed that you haven't returned your absentee ballot. Do you need a ride? You know, because it'll be a little bit too late to send it back in right now. I think that we have got to use metrics, data, again, and directions, as you said, and determination, and not be waylaid by the distractions. Because the post office, we're going to get more votes in the basket with mail than not, and so people should not be afraid of it.
So you raise good points, and you make us think about those strategies, the direction that we need to maybe take a different direction. Are there organizations that can take people to the drop-off sites so that you don't physically touch their ballot, but you take them there to drop it off and just make a line? But I think there are strategies that we're really going to have to rethink. Let me dig.
You know, I just want to make this intervention because we're talking to people from different states. And we do want there to be integrity with the chain of custody for these ballots. We don't want them to be, you know, and so the thing is that there are many nonpartisan groups that work on getting the vote out. And you can take some leadership too in your own building. You know, if you live in a 4-unit apartment building, I mean, this is the time to knock on the door and say, Miss Jenkins, you know, I know it's hard for you to get in and out. You know, have you applied for your absentee ballot? I'm headed to the post office.
And that's what we're doing. Yes.
That's right. And unfortunately, people need witnesses. You know, I live in a household with other people, but I can't witness any of their ballots because I'm on the ballot.
That's right.
So, you know, and so that's a distraction, an impediment. But you can go to some of the drop-off centers and they will witness it for you. I think it's really important for people to take the time to go to, what is it? I will vote. What's the vote?
Or is that, yeah, I wrote that down somewhere. I don't know if it's I can vote or I will vote.
I will vote.
.com.
And then / your state to give you information that you need about how to vote.
Yep, and vote.org too.
Vote, what? Thank you.
What is it?
Vote.org.
Vote.org.
State.
So, Sora, Aisha, let me ask you this question. You said something earlier when you gave us, you talked a little bit about strategies and some of the voting patterns from the past. I've had a number of discussions with some of the younger people in my life, and they kept saying to me, well, Auntie, we're going to vote a certain way because we know you wouldn't speak to us if we didn't. But at the end of the day, they said what they find missing on one side of the campaign, they find it missing on both parties campaigning. And that's really that big push around Latinx, LGBT, and all of those groups that during the candidacy and the campaign of Obama, there seemed to be more of an intentional strategy to go after those votes. And they said, we're not seeing that on either side. So my question to you is, are their votes truly being either taken for granted from the data that you have? Are they just totally missing from the platforms, from either party's discussion? Because if you look at the ads that are on television, the ads don't show it. The ads are more of this against each other versus come to me because I can offer more to you. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah. You know, I've always been, at least the last political cycle, I've been a bit of a critic of the Democratic Party in the way that it has tokenized and taken for granted constituencies that generally vote for the Democratic Party. The thing is that because we may philosophically, those of us who care about justice and equity may philosophically be aligned with one party over the other, that doesn't mean that we're motivated and stimulated to support the person at the top of that ticket, or even, you know, to kind of show up and participate in the process generally, if we're not invited to and engaged, and if we can't see ourselves reflected in that party's, you know, conversation. And so I've been a big critic of that, because what I have observed, and what, you know, I'm a progressive strategist, and part of my finger pointing all the time and trying to nudge the broader presidential apparatus around, you know, the way that they're engaging Americans, is that there is this myth, and I'll call it a myth of a movable middle in America, that for some reason our old school retail politics suggest that there is like 2% of the population that makes all the difference. And those people are a bunch of white people in suburbs. And that these people are either, you know, some of those people were Obama people, and then some of those people moved and became Trump people, and they're every single political cycle, there's an archetype for them. And the Republicans and the Democrats both kind of have these, you know, these caricatures that they create, whether it be Six Pack Joe, or waitress, or the, you know, the white woman waitress, or the soccer mom, or the whoever the hell these people are. I don't know who these people are, but apparently somebody politically believes that they are consequential to the outcomes of every election. The problem, though, is that the very narrow pandering, and on both sides. So you see the Republicans also are pandering to a very narrow kind of swath of people. What they're doing, though, is that they are pandering to their base of people who are a little, and I'm going to say it, like a little bit racist. They feel a little dejected. They need somebody to blame. They angry, they mad. And they're pandering to those people because they know they're their base, and they need those people to show up in mass. What the Democrats do is they pander to this mythical movable middle and forget the base that needs to show up in mass. And so all the people that I talk to too, especially young people who are progressive, are really frustrated, because the issues that matter to LGBTQ people, to people of color across the board that have to do with equity, to, you know, we're watching black bodies, you know, literally be harassed and killed in the streets right now. All these issues that matter, young people care about all these issues too, student loan debt, etc., are certainly taking a back seat to the narrative, because the narrative is about going out and finding, you know, Susie Homemaker, whoever the heck she is, and like getting her to move the right way. What I fear strategically is that what happens in 2020 is going to be what happened in 2016, where Hillary Clinton may have waged a great campaign that had, you know, some of the right issues, but the lack of deep connection to the total, you know, the holistic populace, there was a lack of real outreach and energy invested in. And by the way, invested, I also mean dollars, because you always follow the money and you can see who is being, you know, who people really care about. The Democrats didn't invest the money in the communities that ultimately are always going to be on our side anyway as Democrats. And I say this because I'm a Democrat. And the challenge was that turnout then became low. There was less participation in the overall voting in the election. And so what, if anything, those of us who care about democracy should care about? And this, you know, strategically, Republicans don't agree with me, but I believe that at minimum, if we care about government, politics, policy, we should care about participation. And we should be investing to maximize engagement and participation, and not just think that only one group matters, but that everybody coming out and exercising their voice is really what strengthens our society as a whole. And I do believe that there is one party that is more equipped to do that, because the appeal of what they believe in is probably broader, the Democrats. But, you know, the Republican strategy has been to keep people home and to suppress the engagement and the participation. So all of the folks who are feeling like this, nobody's talking to me, right? Nobody cares about me. Nobody's talking about the issues that I care about. One, they're right. The data would show they're right. The dollars and the money would show that they're right, because they're not being invested in conversations. But what I would just offer to everybody who's watching this is that you may not be wrong But the truth is that at some point, we've got to exercise our own agency to decide that we are going to participate in this process regardless to whether or not people are directly seeking us out. And we need to exercise our voice. And we can't just sit passively by and think that the only time we're supposed to show up is because somebody knocked on our door 4 or 5 or 6 times. At some point, it's our own civic duty to look at what's happening in our communities and decide that we want something different, and that it is incumbent upon us to get the heck up and to engage and act, whether or not, you know, people are talking to us or not. And frankly, hold those people accountable. Knock on their door and be like, yo, you're not talking to me. Why is that? Right? That is civic participation too. So get up, get out. And if you don't appreciate the fact that people are ignoring you, then go and tell them so and just participate.
You know, listen, I just think that this is really deep. We've talked about the data. We know exactly who we are. I mean, I'm not forgetting 4 years ago that the biggest group of voters that determined the outcome of the election were non-voters. And a lot of them, much to my chagrin, were here in my own hometown here. You know, we got to give people directions as to what options they have to vote. We have to be determined as volunteer to help people negotiate through their options. Be careful of distraction. But I believe, Aisha, you brought up another one, deep connection. You know, I think that, you know, I remember once, and you're going to love this, that I was speaking at a breakfast before an LGBT group, and it was right after Katrina. And I was advising this group that they ought to just form a coalition, you know, with people of other interests, you know, like the people in Katrina. And someone leaped from their seat, you know, a gay man. That Katrina is not my issue. So you think that everybody who drowned in New Orleans was straight? I mean,
right.
Help me understand why that wasn't an issue for the LGBT community.
Yep.
But I think that justice is something that has captured the suburban moms. You know, these data, at least one of the reasons that I think that one party, the Republican Party, is rolling out the 1968, you know, violence strategy is because these suburban moms are actually more concerned about justice for Black people and Black Lives Matter than they are fearing protesters. This is something that can capture young Black men. Since Walking While Black, Sleeping While Black, watching Birds While Black can put you in danger of losing your life.
Exactly.
It's something that can capture the imagination of everybody. And so this is an opportunity, I think, to make that deep connection and say, look, we got to flip these protests into votes. I mean, we can protest, lay down our lives, but we've got to make that connection.
The connection.
Getting something done. And I'll just say this, you know, I didn't know who, you know, the Democrats were going to choose as their VP, but I think one of the brilliance of Kamala is that she has a prosecutor's background, and that's something that might turn off that the Russians used last time, you know, to suppress the vote. But this time they have a prosecutor who's focused on prosecuting the really bad guys. I mean, people who damage the environment with oil and gas spills, so that should bring the environmentalists out. I mean, a person who went after the banks, who foreclosed on poor, helpless homeowners and took advantage of them during the crisis and made away with their life's fortune. She has leaned into some of the worst sexual predators and traffickers. And so, you know, she has focused her work on not catching that guy with the bag of weed so much as she has going after real serious criminals. And this is another way. And she is leading, as I pointed out. You've heard her commercials already on the justice in policing. And she has that voice of credibility I think can really help soccer moms not feel scared. Young black men feel confidence that maybe something will get done. And really, I'll just say this, Kamala is not a mother, but as a member of the Congressional Black Caucus, this woman put yeoman's work into our mama's bill, our response to the horrific maternal mortality among Black women and women of color. I mean, she leaned into working that as hard as anyone. And so she has a breadth that I think will appeal to a large swath of the coalition. Now, what I must say, in order to be nonpartisan, is that the other side is doing a great job too. I mean, they're trying to start the second Civil War. They started in Kenosha, Wisconsin, which is crazy because Wisconsin was one of the places where fugitive slaves ran to. It's just not the environment to spark the second Civil War. But they are looking at people, everybody wants to feel safe. I can't think of any group, can you, Aisha, that doesn't want to feel safe?
Nope.
And when you hear, something like defund the police, which I have heard that phrase come out of more Republicans' mouths than I have heard anybody. But it is something that they're using, violence that one side is using to frighten people. And it worked in 1968. And this is something that's torn out of that playbook. And so this is one of the distractions that I'm wondering, Aisha, I mean, how do we get around, how do we negotiate the conversation of defunding the police?
That's a whole
Aisha,
conversation for another day.
Make your comment, Aisha. We're running out of time, but I want to get your comment in.
I'll just say this. I want, all the things that the Congresswoman is saying are so true. And I just want everyone to walk away from this conversation remembering two things. One, the greatest threat, the greatest domestic terrorist threat in America of violence to our safety is white supremacy.
Yeah.
Our own federal government found that in its research and wanted to, even in this administration, bring forward to the public the fact that domestic terrorism by white nationalists, white supremacists, racists is the greatest threat to our safety and our communities in America, period. So all this other mess is a distraction. Just remember that. The other thing, as we're going into election season, it is difficult. We are not door knocking in the same way through COVID, right? We're not able to gather. We're not at church, so we can't do souls to the polls in the same way. But here's the good news. For the last couple of election cycles, over the last, decade, tools have been developed to reach people where they are. We are doing so much phone banking now through text message, where you can sit on your couch and log in with whatever organization is getting out the vote in your community and be able to sit on your couch and use your computer or your cell phone to text other voters, to text neighbors and say, hey girl, you go vote. Hey dude, can I come and pick you up and drop you off to go vote? Whatever it might be.
Exactly.
So if you want to participate, which we need you to participate, know that there are ways to do that are non-traditional, and there are myriad of organizations working at the national level, and I'm sure in your communities, that can connect you with being able to engage with voters in a safe way, but is still in a robust way to move us to the polls, because we got to maximize turnout. That's all that we need to remember, is that we got to participate, y'all. We got to do it. We got to vote, and we got to get everybody we know to vote. And we're not going to do it the same way necessarily that we always did, but that doesn't mean that it shouldn't be done. So get out there and help get out the vote.
I love this. We are out of time. Where did the time go? I want to thank you, our special panelist, Aisha C Mills. We adore you, and you are always welcome back. Congresswoman Moore, you get 30 seconds to so that the last voice that they hear is yours. What do you want us to do?
I want to say
I want to thank
Aisha Mills and Dr. Prince for joining us on Not for Sisters Only, because we are sisters that are leading a conversation. But as Black women, we realize that we lead the community in voting. We vote more than anyway. So it's our responsibility, sisters, to make sure that our brothers and our husbands and our nephews and our other fellow sisters get out to vote. Let's take the lead in this and show up. Thank you so much for joining us and vote. It is your voice.
Yes. Thank you.